They were actually Puritans. They were called Brownists after the man that was their leader, Brown, and they were um, also they were separatists. Now Puritans were in the Church of England was the only church that was accepted in England during that time. Okay, so you'd had the Protestant Reformation and you had the Church of England, and you were basically Church of England. That was it. Of course, when they had a Catholic ruler come in, you were Catholic, or that was it, right? But even in the Church of England, these people were in the Church of England, but yet they saw things that were wrong. They saw things that were just being done in form, and that they did not agree with, and so they wanted to purify things. Well, that's why they call them Puritans. All right, so they taught more of a holiness type doctrine. Now they were Calvinists, but even within the Puritans, you had some that were content to remain in the Church of England and just kind of be who they were. But the thing with the people that we know as the Pilgrims is they were part of a group called the Separatists. All right, and the Separatists believed that no, we've got to separate ourselves from that because the doctrines they're teaching are just not right, and we can't be a part of it. So the Separatists were persecuted for that. There were laws passed that they had to, if they missed a service or something, they had to pay a tax. Some of them were even put to death because of their refusal to bow down to the Church of England. So they said, well, this isn't working too good for us. So they went to Holland, and Holland accepted them. They were a little more open-minded, I guess, to things, and they said, well, yeah, you do your thing, and we're cool with it and everything, so y'all just do what you're going to do. So they go to Holland. Well, but Holland's society was not such as they wanted to have their children to grow up in, because it was a very loose, very much more loose than what they were anyway. And they were losing their identity living in this country. Of course, the language barrier and other things, that was a problem. But one thing, and I'll read this, says that William Bradford, which was the Puritan leader, William Bradford lists some of the reasons for which the Pilgrims felt they had to leave from Holland, including the discouragements that they faced in the Netherlands and the hope of attracting others by finding a better and easier place of living. He says, the children of the group being drawn away by evil examples into extravagance and dangerous courses. Okay, so their children were basically becoming, getting into the world like children will do, right? That happens. But they were losing their identity. They were losing their culture. And so they decided that they would go to the New World. All right. They were actually in Leyden, Holland at the time. And so they began to explore the opportunity to go to the New World. They had to attach themselves to people who had money. All right, because they didn't have the means of doing it. So they basically contracted with a company to go to the New World, and they would work for so long and send back to this company and establish a settlement, and that would pay their way there, enable them to do that. Of course, that's where the Mayflower comes into play at, and the journey started out well. About halfway through, or a little over halfway through, they started hitting storms and rough seas. One of the main beams in the Mayflower developed a crack. They thought they were going to have to go back to England, but they had they called it a large screw. Basically what it was, a great iron screw, they call it. So it was probably something used for construction, like a big jack, and or a cider press or something like that. And they used that to repair the beam, and were able to make it on to the New World. Now their destination was the Virginia colony. okay? Because that's where everything was happening, right? In the 1600s. Go to Virginia, right? Virginia is for lovers, right? Okay. So anyway, the thing was to go to Virginia. Well, through all the storms, they got blown off course, and so they end up north. Um, and they tried to, even after they got here, they tried to go south towards, but they couldn't get down there. Of course, winter is coming on. I mean, a lot of them were dying. Not many died on the way over, but once they got here, things were so hard on them. Some of them had died, or died through that first winter. They says here the Mayflower passengers sighted land on November the 9th, 1620, after enduring miserable conditions for about 65 days. Now, could you imagine? Has anybody ever looked at one of these little ships, like the Mayflower, or what was the Santa Maria? Is that what we saw? No, the Pinta. We saw a reproduction of the Pinta. They're not very big. And you got all these people in there, and they had some goats. Well, that's what you want to travel with. And they had some pigs. That's definitely what you want to travel with. And then they had some chickens. Okay, so here they are. They're all in this little space with these animals. And of course, everybody wasn't pilgrims. A lot of them were people that were manning the ship, and some of them were people that were going to try to settle there, but they were not part of the Puritan body. So you have all of these people. It says when William Brewster, when they finally made it to the New World, what did they do? He led them in reading Psalm 100 as a prayer of thanksgiving. And you know what that is. Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands, right? So they confirmed that the area was Cape Cod, where they ended up at. And after they tried to leave from there, they ended up coming back nearby there. Okay, so they're in a place. This was interesting to me. They're in a place that they're not supposed to be. They were contracted to go to Virginia. So basically, they don't have a contract to be where they're at. And some of the people spoke up and said, well, hey, we're not where we're at with the people we contracted. We're not in that place where we're supposed to be, so we're free. We can do what we want to do. But the integrity of William Brewster said, no, we can get off on a technicality, but we're not going to do that. We're going to do what's right. And so they determined that they would make a compact. They would make basically a little constitution. What was that compact? What was that called, huh? The Mayflower Compact, right? Even at Petal High School, or Petal Elementary School, they taught us that, right? So they entered into this compact, which was just basically an agreement, probably the first one of its kind in our country, and one which was probably a lot of things were based upon after that. So it says, for the general good, and you can read this on your own time. I'm obviously not going to read the compact, but it's really quite interesting if you're into history, and I am, which is why I'm boring all of you good people with this. For the general good of the colony, unto which we promise all due submission and obedience. That's why they formed that compact. It organized them into what was called a civil body politic, in which issues would be decided by voting, the key ingredient of democracy. It was ratified by majority rule, with 41 adult male pilgrims signing for the 102 passengers. So, all right, so, they needed something to guide them, right? I mean, to me, that is something. They said, we're going to write this down, and we're going to all agree to do this. We're going to have some sort of legal authority to follow here. That's in our roots as the American Republic that we're a part of. Now, as far as we know they went through that first winter. A lot of people died from sicknesses, and exposure to the elements, probably all kinds of things. They came through that. They met some Squanto. You remember the story of Squanto? Okay, Squanto was an Indian or Native American. This man is fascinating to me. Squanto is. He was kidnapped by, I believe, the English explorers, if I'm not mistaken, had kidnapped him, possibly Spanish, I can't remember. But they kidnapped this young man and took him back to Europe. And he was there for, I don't remember the whole story of how everything, but he ended up being sold to someone else. He made his way to England. He eventually got to England. The man that bought him educated him. And eventually he made his way back from there, back to America. All right? Back to the area where he was from. Well, his whole tribe had been wiped out by disease. So he's there alone. I think he joined himself to another tribe, which was headed by Massasoit. You probably heard of Massasoit. So there he is. He shows up with these people. They're dying. Man, they're starving to death. They don't know how to plant in this new country. They don't know what to do. And this guy shows up speaking English and shows them how to live, shows them how to plant corn, shows them how to catch fish, shows them how to do all of these things to enable them to live, introduces them to the tribe that he's a part of, Massasoit's tribe, and they became friends and cooperative and began to work together. They helped them to get a foothold, right? They forged a treaty or forged a friendship said lasted for 50 years. 50 years. They lived in cooperation with one another. But for them, they would have probably all died. I mean, they were unable to sustain themselves. So then after they had their harvest and everything, that's where what we would call the first Thanksgiving came into play. They had a good crop. They decided to invite their Indian friends to come be with them and share in their bounty, share in what God had done for them. They had a 3-day festival, so we have, kind of works now, right? Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Right? So that's what we do, right? We eat Thursday, and then Friday and Saturday we eat what we didn't eat Thursday. So that's kind of, still goes by the same plan, more or less. But no, they did. They played games. They did all kinds of things together and celebrated what God had done for them. Now, that did not continue, obviously, from 1620 on. The holiday that we recognize, although some various states did celebrate various days of Thanksgiving, but actually it was during the Civil War, President Lincoln proclaimed a national day of Thanksgiving. That was in 1863. So that was, the country was going through some hard things. 1863 is when Gettysburg was fought. So the country was going through some pretty hard things. So in the midst of all of that, he proclaimed a national day of Thanksgiving to be held each November. And I believe the date might have changed somewhat until they settled on when they did. But so that was from 1863 on. It has continued to be celebrated. So, I look at these things, and to me, this is foundational. This is foundational of our nation. Now, I realize we're talking about a nation, our actual nation. We're talking about the Revolutionary War and the establishment of the Constitution and all of those things. But this is in our DNA. And there are people who want to destroy this. I read an article before I came here. I'm not even going to go into it. They really want to transform Thanksgiving into something else. But as I said the other night, who are we thanking? Who were they thanking? They were thanking God. They were giving thanks to God. And that's just more of it, trying to get God out of society, right? I get it. I know that all of our founding fathers were not good Christian men. I'm sure they weren't. But I do believe that the vast majority of them did hold a high moral ideal. And whatever they did in their private lives, I don't know about all of that. But I do believe they held a high moral ideal and recognized, obviously, by the Declaration of Independence, right? Our Creator. They mentioned the Creator, okay? So just to recognize that there is a God and that He is, as Franklin said when they were fashioning the Declaration. He says that if how did he say it? If a sparrow cannot fall without God noticing it, can a nation rise without Him noticing it? Without Him giving it aid? Okay, so well, whether you agree with that sentiment or not, the thing is that they recognized that they needed the blessings of God to be able to be successful. And so, may God help us to continue as long as we can and to recognize that. And I pray that the generation behind us, I mean, that's hard to believe. I think sometimes Sister Renee, I was thinking the other day, I said, my goodness, I'm 67 years old. I don't even hardly believe this. How did I get to be 67, right? Come on. What's going on here? How did this slip up on me like this? And I usually think about it when I try to stand up. So I don't spring up like I used to, I just have a little more spring in my step. But time is marching on. Time is marching on. We don't know what shall be in the future, but we know this. We know because we read it in the Psalm this past Sunday, that His truth endureth to all generations. So we know His truth will be here for everyone when they want to avail themselves of it. It'll be available. Amen. So I thank God. I thank God for the goodness in our lives. As has been said tonight, man, we've been through some knotholes. As Brother Ben says, we have been through some knotholes. We've been through some difficulties. I mean, all sorts of difficulties, right? Temporal, spiritual, physical. I mean, we go through all. That's just life. We get it. That's just life. But thank God that I do have a God to look to, and He's not. It's not just as Lenin said, the opiate of the masses. It's not just, or Marx or whoever said it. It came from the communists, but it's not religion or Christianity is not just the opiate of the masses. We're not all just high on this opium dream of some God in the sky, right? No, it's real. It's personal, and it's personal with me. I mean, I know Him. I met Him, and and I believe it's personal with you as well. So may we ever lift that up, because that's what the world needs. They need salvation. They need this great truth. All right, Sister Wingate.